Hello there. I want to talk about why I still use film in the year 2020. It would seem as if the digital cameras have so much advantage over film that film would not hold its appeal anymore. The digital cameras, you can adjust the ISO or the sensor's sensitivity to light. With the old film cameras, you would pick a film that's rated for the type of light conditions you were most likely to experience or be shooting in, and then you would lock that in. You couldn't change it. All you had left was your aperture and your shutter speed to get proper exposure with. Not only that, some of the film, most of the cameras, the consumer cameras, if it went to 1/1000th of a shutter speed, you were lucky. That was it. That was as fast as you could do your shutter speed. You couldn't go to like 1/2000th or 1/4000th like the modern DSLRs will. In addition to that, the digital cameras don't cost very much. Once you get the camera and the memory card, etc., you can shoot, and basically your pictures are pretty much free. Okay, you don't have to send them off to be developed. You don't have to learn how to develop. There's just a whole range of reasons why the modern DSLRs might be considered superior to film. I don't look at it that way. I love my DSLR. It's a wonderful tool for photography and also for learning, but it's not better than film. And film is not better than the DSLR. There are two different types of tools for two different types of results. So why would I want to use film in 2020? Well, if you haven't looked around and seen in the photography, amateur photography community, there are a ton of 20-year-old and 30-year-old and even teens now in this generation that have fallen in love with film and film cameras. And there's a reason for that. With an old dog like me, it's nostalgia. This is what I learned on. It's what I cut my teeth with. Okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about why I love them. But the modern younger generation is finding that this is a fantastic medium for photography. And I don't know why they love it. I know why I love it. And the thing of it is like I said, when I was a boy, or even as an adult, for a very long time, if you wanted to take a picture of something, you had one option, and it was film. And unless you had a nice camera, most of the time it was one of those little 35mm point and shoot cameras, or a 110 point and shoot, or something like that. Okay, there's no settings on it or nothing like that. You just pointed that camera, hope the picture came out. Okay. If you were indoors, you did the very best you could to make sure that you turned every light you could find on, that kind of deal. But back in the 80s, my stepson gave me this camera. This camera is what really made me fall in love with photography. The point and shoots, all the cameras that I used when I was a boy and stuff like that, they were just a means to an end. But this camera made me love photography. Now, it was a long time before I took it seriously. But every time I held this camera in my hands and used it, it was immensely satisfying. I really enjoyed it. And the thing I like about it, if you look at this camera, what do I like about 35 millimeter? Well, first of all, 35 millimeter has, or film in general, but 35 millimeter because it's by far probably the most widely used and commonly known of the film cameras, besides maybe 110. Okay, but 35 millimeter film, why do I love it? It has a character to it. It's a different look. In my opinion, it's a lot warmer a lot of times than the modern DSLRs, although from my experience, if you use exposure properly, you can affect the warmth, especially doing things like nature photography and wildlife photography or bird photography. You can warm that up. You can make digital really warm depending on how you compensate for exposure when you're shooting. So, but it's a different kind of warm. The digital cameras sometimes can be like, they're sharper, but sometimes they can be like way too sharp, in my opinion. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's like, I have, this is my Konica Auto Reflex T. It's the first really nice camera that I got. And it has a, I think this is a 1.4, no, it's a 1.8, f1.8 is the widest aperture. That's a pretty fast lens. This is the 52 millimeter hexagon. This is a slamming lens. I have a Minolta X700 as well, and the 50 millimeter 1.4, I think it is, might be a 1.7, but I believe it's a 1.4 that I have on it, or a 58 millimeter 1.2 I've got. I've posted pictures, especially of the 58 millimeter, and people go, well, you kind of misfocused, didn't you? No, I didn't misfocus. That lens has a characteristic, there's a softness to that lens and a glow to that lens that I think, depending on the subject matter, like for portraits, that softness and that glow really helps portraits stand out. Particularly, a lot of times if you're doing portraiture, people don't want super sharp because they don't want every flaw in their face on film or on a digital representation. Okay, there are reasons why you might not always want hyper sharp, but for me there's just sometimes the colors coming out, especially out of that 58 Rokkor, are almost like pastel. It's almost like a painting. It's just beautiful. But it's not modern. It's not like the modern pictures. And if you go on a modern photography where people are shooting digital and you share that film, a film camera shot, as opposed to like putting a vintage lens on something like a A7R or whatever, the Sony camera or whatever, the Micro Four Thirds particularly, people use those cameras and they have focus, I think it's called, well, I can't remember, but what it is, focus highlighting or something like that, where they can actually push a button and it'll light up in different colors all the areas that are in focus and out of focus and stuff like that, and they can get really sharp focus that way with the older lenses. One of the problems with using older lenses on DSLRs is the older cameras had a focus screen, and it would help you to actually get focus because it would the center of the picture would be fuzzy until you got that focus right, and then it would be clear, just basically speaking. The modern DSLRs, they don't have focusing screens like that in them, and if you're not very careful, you won't get the greatest of focus if you put an older lens on a modern DSLR. But I do it all the time. You just got to get good at changing the focus, at manual focusing, okay, and take a lot of shots, okay. People do that with DSLRs anyway a lot of time. But anyway, there's just a look to it. The grain in digital photography sometimes can be off-putting, very off-putting. The grain in film sometimes can be artistic. There's just a look to it that I really adore. And that's a lot of why I shoot film. But there's another reason that I shoot film. It's the cameras. These old cameras, man, this camera, that's a really cool looking camera, in my opinion. Now, this is built like a tank, okay? But, you know, the DSLRs, they've got buttons, and they've got like a roller thing up here. My Canon has a little roller wheel I can adjust the shutter speed that way, or I've got the little electronic roller back here that I can adjust aperture with. But on these cameras, the tactile, first of all, this thing weighs. It's got weight to it. It's substantial. It feels like quality. It feels like it's built really well. A lot of the modern DSLRs, unless you're spending a lot of money, they're plastic housings. They don't feel like they're substantial. Okay? They feel like if you drop them, they shatter in a million pieces. Some of them probably would. Okay? But, look. You load the film manually. It's got, if I want to change my shutter speed, I mean, there's a tactile feel to the way this thing works. Okay? You know, I'm not going to, there's no, you know, it's not shooting like a machine gun. It's an intentional kind of thing where I'm intentionally taking that shot. And you can do that intentionally with digitals too, but a lot of times, especially for sports and for wildlife and stuff like that, man, you've got that thing on burst mode and you're going to town because you're trying to get that perfectly sharp shot, and you're going to go through those pictures and pick the one that's the best. And that's a plus. I'm not saying it's not, but this kind of photography slows you down, and you have to be more purposeful in what you do. And also, you know, instead of the little wheel or the little wheel back here for on a digital camera, if I want to change aperture, there's just, the cameras have a feel to them in use that I love. Okay, some of the greatest photographers that ever lived were film photographers, and I'm not really even making this video to encourage you to use film. If it's something that you're interested in, then yeah, by all means, give it a try, because I think you'll find that it's wonderful, a wonderful medium. And I'll put some pictures on of film shots that I've taken over the years. But for me, that's the reason I still use film today. Is there's something special. Look, it's special anytime I get to go out in the field and take pictures of anything, okay? I love photography. But there's something special about taking an old camera, and in this instance, this camera and a light meter, and going about it in a way that it was done before I was born. Okay? there's a connection to the past, but it's just a wonderful tactile kind of thing. And I have an old light meter that I use, handheld light meter that I use with this camera, and the tactile feel of using that light meter is also a part of it that I really love. And so that's why I do it. And I don't do it often, but when I do it because I want that feel and I want that experience. It's something different from the modern type of cameras. It's also something I'm familiar with from times past, and it's just that's why I shoot it. And the new guys, the younger generation, I kind of feel like that's probably the reason they're doing it too. The tactile feel of the camera, the sense of, look, with a digital camera, you know, I'm not saying everybody does this, but I can take a shot, wait for it to load and look on the back of the camera and adjust my exposure and all of that, and then finally get the picture right. That's an advantage. With this right here is the only thing I've got to tell me whether or not I'm going to get an exposure right. And it makes me, it gives me in some ways more control. And what I mean by that is not more options, but what I get on that film is what I did. Okay? If it turns out bad, well, then I need to figure out what I did wrong and correct it. It'll make me learn, because it'll make me stop and think, okay, this came out too bright, it came out too dark. How did I underexpose it or overexpose it? You know, one of the things, like I love to shoot birds, and I like the little songbirds. And a lot of times, when you're shooting the little songbirds, they're up in a tree and they're backlit. Okay, well, if you're shooting a backlit subject, the meter in your camera is going to say, well, these are the settings, because it's measuring that light that's behind the subject, and what you'll end up with is a black silhouette. You won't get a picture of that bird. You have to intentionally overexpose. Now with a digital camera, I can take a shot, look at it, see that it's too dark, overexpose it according to the camera's meter, take another shot, and you know, it'll come out. But a lot of times what will happen is we're not thinking. Okay? We're just messing with dials on the camera, and we can shoot it, look at it, and say, okay, that's right now. But we're not really learning why it's right. Why what we did was wrong, and why what we did to fix it is right. With one of these, I don't have that option. I have to understand exposure. I have to understand exposure in difficult situations if I want the pictures to come out. And that's another thing. I think that it helps you grow. I'm not saying it'll help you learn better than or faster than a digital camera, but it will. When you're paying for the shot, there's more of an incentive to get it right. Now, you could say, well, I can take the digital camera, and that's a good learning tool too, because it makes me do all those, and that's true. If you're using this and not just depending on the buttons on, you know, moving the buttons around till you get the picture you want, and then going on and forgetting what happened there. So, I mean, this is an old argument. It's been made over and over and over again. And like I said, I'm not telling you that film is better or digital is better. And this is not a video of which one's better or my reasons why I like this over that. Because to be quite honest, I would not want to give up my digital SLR any more than I would want to give up my film cameras. It's just a different look. It's a different technique. It's a different feel. It's a different atmosphere. And I like them both. So I'm going to drop in some pictures here that I've taken with this camera and the Minolta X700. And I'm going to say thanks for watching and bless you. Later.